Hello guys, this is Big Al again. Tonight we're going to tie a little woolhead baitfish pattern. My little fly tying group has asked me to do bass flies for the next thing, so this is going to be just a little all-around baitfish imitation. It can be used for a whole lot of different species of baitfish. You can color it to whatever color suits your fancy for whatever local baitfish you have. That's why I'm using primarily white in this fly. And I have white thread. It can be used from white wool. Of course, you could change that. You could use a little olive. The nice thing with white wool is you can kind of color it to your needs also. So to start off, I've attached the thread, and I got a bare hook shank for the upper 2/3 of it there. You want that hook shank bare. And what I've done now is I've just clipped 3 strands of crystal flash that I'm going to fold over and give a snip to them. Give a little snip. See if I can mess this up. There we go. Clean up the ends. Now I have a nice little flush tie-in point. Tying this on directly on top of the hook shank here. I'm going to go and trim it off back here. This is probably about a shank and a half length here to the back of my little collar for my vise here. That's one thing I like about the Dyna Kings. When you use them in line like this, I can really use the barrel and the collar and the jaws themselves to give pretty good little length measurements. So I have 6 strands coming back. Now I'm going to attach, this is a select Marabou plume that I've been cutting on. And all I'm going to do is simply grab a little chunk of these. Doesn't take a whole lot, but I think as most of us know, Marabou gets great action in the water. So I'm seeing I've already cut, some of these tips are gone for some reason, but that's okay. If you remember from earlier videos, there's a little trick you can do. So what I'm going to do with this Marabou is I'm going to cut it right up here close to the spine of this plume there. So I have a nice little chunk cut out. You can kind of see it below down here. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and just tie this. I'm going to cut it flush so I have a pretty level tie-in. I'm not worrying about the length coming out the back at all. Again, I'm just going directly on top of the hook shank here. You can kind of push it down around on both sides. You don't really have to though. Then I'm going to come back here to where this crystal flash ends. Take my thumbnail here, and I'm just going to give it a little rip. And what that tends to do is instead of, if I were to cut it with my scissors, what would happen is when it gets wet and in the water, it's going to look like I cut it. Okay, so it's going to be pretty flush and square. If you break it and tear it, it kind of doesn't do an even like that, and it's a more natural look in the water, which this piece is not real good. That's okay for this video. Now I'm going to attach, I've cut 2 Grizzlie Hackle, and these are just off of a saltwater woolly bugger pack kind of thing. And I'm going to attach each of these on the outside here with the shiny side facing out of either side. Okay? The important reason for the shiny side out is now they're going to be kind of going back towards each other on the hook here. And I do these individually for that reason right there. I don't know, you probably couldn't see that too well, but as I was wrapping it, it tried to fold over so that when it was going to be lashed down even more, it was going to be kinked. It was going to be laying flat instead of laying vertical. So I want these to be pretty vertical against the side of the other rest of the tail stuff here. And I got it just extending just slightly beyond that Marabou. All right. trim this off. I'm coming forward, and now we're going to start our wool. Not worried about this little space right here. You could, if you wanted to, you could put a little red or a little orange piece hanging down there. I'm not that concerned with it in reality. And now I'm going to get some of our wool. This was a nice piece of wool I picked up that I've already kind of combed out, so it's completely ready to be tied with. Don't have to worry about combing it out or anything. And I'll take, on my first cut here, this is the only one I really measure. And what I'm going to measure here is I want this to come back about halfway on the tail here. So I'm going to kind of hold it. I'm holding it in my right hand, which is this hand. I'm going to get it to where I want it, and then I'm going to transfer it into my left hand here, and then kind of push it around the hook shank with my left hand. What I'm really doing is I'm coming from the top, and I'm just kind of lightly rolling it down so it kind of covers the whole hook there. And I'm going to make 2 loose wraps here. 1, 2, and then I'm going to give it a nice little tug. And now I'm just going to space this out. Make a wrap or 2 in front there. Don't worry about that. We're going to be trimming this, so it's okay. I've changed how I used to do that. I used to trim that front piece pretty short, but I'm leaving it long now, and you'll see why once we go to trim it. Okay, now I'm cutting, and I have a whole piece here, and I'm just going to lay this on top and do the same thing. I'm just coming around the hook shank, 1 wrap, 2 wrap, pull tight, and just brush it back. Okay, separating a little bit. Again, 1 wrap, 2 wrap. This is how we used to tie all the woolhead flies. Now I see more people stacking it. The reason being is they claim that with stacking it, they can get a better, more consistent head, not have any gaps, anything like that. I don't know. I think once you tie enough of them like I have over the years, because this is a fly that I use a lot in salt water, but it can sure be used for just about any species that eats baitfish. I treat it like deer hair, and this is somewhat how I would tie deer hair, with packing it back as I'm going. So I'm going to take and push this back, and my hair packers are just my fingernails. I used a tool at one point when I was first starting with deer hair, and got to be an extra step, so I just deleted it and started using my fingernails. As long as you don't bite your fingernails, you're okay. And we're just going to keep on going. You could also add eyes to this. Lead eyes, bead chain eyes, whatever you wanted. I tend to fish this fly in the film, so I grease this head up when I fish it, so it kind of, with fly floatant, and that way it theoretically floats, which it kind of does. As fish eat it, you have to keep on re-greasing it pretty much just like a dry fly. That's okay, I don't mind it. It pushes a lot of water, and the fish really seem to like it. And you can put weed guards on this. I tend not to on the smaller ones, sometimes on the bigger ones, or like if I'm going to be in Louisiana fishing this, I'll definitely put weed guards, because I'm using in ponds and stuff in the salt where there's lots of grass growing. So you really need to do that. The first time I fished this in Louisiana was a big one. It was about a 4-aught one that I had tied up for big trout in Texas. And the guide looked at me and said, "Lester, what you going to do with that thing?" I said, "Bubby, I'm going to catch redfish." And he kind of laughed and chuckled and said, "Oh, man, that's not going to do nothing." I said, "Okay." And by the time I had gotten through, he looked at me and said, "Lester, I'll take as many of those as you care to tie me and send to me, because they really do work well. They push a lot of water. They're good in muddy water. They're good in clear water. That doesn't really matter." I enjoy fishing them. Also, with this wool, and the head design of it is like a bullet when you trim it. So it's just, I want a cigar type shape where it's just completely round. I'm not looking for any real shape or anything. It's okay to have a little, you know, missed clumps on the trim job. I'm not too particular when I trim this head because I feel like if you have little odd angles in there, it actually could help with the action of it when you're retrieving it. So I'm not too concerned with it. Can I push that back 3 or 4 times now as I've tied this? And this will be my final little piece of wool hair that I'm going to add on. And the clump size I'm using is about the diameter of like a Sharpie marker, something like that. It's kind of up to you. You can use more. I'd rather make 15 of these or 10 of these, however many I've done, than just 3. I think that's the biggest problem versus stacking is I think people cut way too much of a clump and then it just doesn't sit right when they go to spin it on there like this and separate it out. So now I'm just going to trim it, whip finish it up here real quick. Put down, give it a little pull on the eye there. Okay, now this is going to be trimmed for a minute. And for that, I use a different pair of scissors than my normal cutting scissors. For this to trim, I really like using, I can't find them at the moment. That's what happens when you got too much stuff on your desk. But I really prefer using a curved blade pair of scissors because the curved blades really allow you to get in the nooks and crannies where where a straight scissors do not. So it's a whole lot better, I feel, when I'm trimming this thing up to use the curved blades. Same with deer hair. I always use curved blades whenever I'm trimming up deer hair. These are just so dull. They've been used so much doing deer hair stuff and other assorted stuff that they're just about not usable anymore. So we're just trimming this up. And I would normally remove the vise to show you how I'm doing this, but I want to just try to keep it all rolling here. I'm not really being too particular on making sure it's completely, a perfect circle. I'm not really that concerned with it on this slide, to be perfectly honest with you. All I'm looking for is a general shape. One of the issues, if you start getting into the frame of mind that it has to be perfect, it has to be this, has to be that, well, before you realize it, you've trimmed your whole head, okay? That's not really what we're looking for here. I want, a fairly decent sized head on this. This is a small one. This is a size 4, so this is something, I took it by the shop today to make sure it was going to be okay, what the guys thought to do for our bunch to tie, and they all, as soon as they saw it, said, oh, that'd be a great dock light fly. I said, well, okay, if that's what you want to use it for, great. That's, one thing about fishing, people look at it one way, and you go show it somebody, and they'll show you something that I would never even really consider using this for dock lights. Just for dock lights, I use something much sparser. I found fishing under lights, they like really small, generally clear, translucent-y type stuff. But that's just been my experience with them. Of course, that can change for the area you're in, whole bunch of different circumstances there. Okay, we're about done trimming here. The reason I left that first bit long is this right here. I can pull up these long fibers that are left and know for a fact that those are needing to be cut because I did not trim them initially. If you trim them initially before you tie it in on that very first one, you don't know where the back end of that first stack is necessarily. doing it this way, you definitely know where that back end of the first stack is and know not to cut into it. So, all right. And all you got to do is when you're trimming it, just every now and again, just look at it, see if it's looking all right. It's okay if it's a little more horizontal than round, you know, more like an actual baitfish's shape somewhat. That's just fine. But I really like, if you're going to use eyes version, you know, put some eyes in there, some lead eyes or bead chain eyes, I think that's when you want the more of the, you know, kind of squished head versus a completely round head. The round head is good because then it just kind of comes right back to you. It doesn't try to really swim anywhere or do anything too funky. And this one has gotten to be kind of vertical on me, so I'm going to trim some off the bottom here. And give the top a little nip or two, and then we'll be done with this. It's going to go back in the vise. So I'm going to show you all a little trick when you're tying with wool and you've trimmed it like this. Okay, I can put this back in the vise. Okay. And now I can take my thumbnail and just flick down on the eye. You can see all these little pieces of wool bouncing out of there. Okay, what that's also going to do, anywhere I have long stray hairs sticking up, I can trim those real nice and easy. Okay? Just cleans up the head for you a little bit. Easy way to do that. So that is that. And now, what I like to do with this part now is I'll take, I'm not a big fan of the eyes, the glue-on eyes and that kind of stuff. It's a recipe for disaster. They're eventually going to come out normally after just only a few fish. So I like just taking a Sharpie and just putting my eyes in by hand, just doing it just like this. And yes, this black Sharpie does, you know, kind of bleach out somewhat once you get it wet and all that, and a few fish have eaten it, but that's okay. I personally find that I've not seen a noticeable difference between these type of flies, whether they have eyes or not. So to me, it's not a huge deal, but you can skip that whole step. And that is it. That's our little baitfish imitation. Easy to cast, very aerodynamic. You can cast this, you know, 3-weight, 4-weight, not much of a problem. Big trout would probably eat it without much issue. And again, you can put eyes on there, weighted eyes if you want to, that's fine. You can change colors. I could take a marker and, you know, color a little gray on the top or a little olive on the top if you want to. That'd be just fine. But I just find it's not really necessary. So that is it. Good luck, and I hope you all enjoy.